So I was just taking a break, getting a drink, and coming back to writing. But I looked out the window, and right now, in addition to our normal huskies, we have that sounds funny. We have dogs. We have huskies. They're adult huskies. In addition to our adult huskies, we have two husky puppies right now, and they're in a pretty cute phase, and they're running around all playing. And I turned around to come back in, and I remembered a conversation that I had with two of my friends recently. Well, I was just there. They were having the conversation, but I was there, and they were teasing me a little bit about how nothing about me is puppy dogs and rainbows or something like that. And I don't remember the exact response that I gave, but it was something like, well, I'd just like to think that my puppy dogs and rainbows are a little bit different. And that was a typical comment I make when I just want to skip the stone across the surface instead of going deep. But as I looked at the puppies out back, I had a chain of thoughts. And so let's see if I can just reconstruct a little snippet of this, maybe. As briefly as I can. You know, God's throne is surrounded by a rainbow, and the rainbow is highly symbolic. It has a lot of meaning. And the process of coming to know him is a process of coming to see that rainbow. And we really don't see things as they are here. It's part of the process in life is to come and see much more of him than we saw before. Jesus said in John 10, I believe, I think it's 10:10, in fact, he said that he came to give life more abundantly. And that kind of life is eternal life. To know him is eternal life. To know him more fully is to have life more abundantly. More fully than what? Than what we knew before. Here on earth, we see things, and I've had notes. I've had a partial presentation on this ready to present for probably 3 years now. Pictures and everything. So we'll see if I ever get to it, but I'll explain it to you. On earth, we see things here much differently than what they really mean. The meaning is different. So here's something. For example, the crown of thorns that the Lord wore. It's actually a crown of glory. And if you had eyes to see, you'd see that it's actually a rainbow. And I know that doesn't make sense, or it sounds mystical or something. But in heaven, because things on heaven, they look different than they would down here. There's a connection, but there's a mapping. It's different there. You know, colors exist there, but they're so much richer than they are here. It's I don't know how to describe it, but it's so much deeper. The robe, it's a red robe that the Lord wears in his throne room. It's the richest red you'll ever see. It's so hard to describe. But the colors of the rainbow are the same, but they're different. They're so much deeper. So this crown, it's not like you would imagine an earthly crown. They're beams of light that go out. And it's just an amazing thing. It's what a crown of glory looks like. In the movie The Wizard of Oz, it starts off black and white. If you haven't seen that movie, I hope to goodness you do. It's on the list of movies you really need to see, just like It's a Wonderful Life. There are a couple of movies like that. We have such a gift to be given this language where we can see these movies and then use the ideas and communicate and stand on those shoulders and go further. But in this movie, everything's black and white and there's a storm. And Dorothy gets sucked up into this tornado and she gets spit out. She's in her house. The house gets spit out and she's in Oz. And when she opens the door, everything outside the door is in color. And so the rest of the movie's in color while she's in Oz. And that is what I think of as a mapping function. It's a technical term from data science, but it's to take things and to take data and transform it into different sets of variables. That's not going to make much sense to people. Dorothy was the same. She was just in a different place. And because she was in a different place, she saw everything differently. She saw it in color. Now, let me see if I can anchor this so that you don't think I'm just rambling here. This is all very directed. Right now, you see color in your life. But what you don't realize is it's temporary. It's like a free sample at the food court at the mall. And it exists for a reason. It's given to you for a reason. But if you think of reality as a knob, like the volume on a stereo or something, as reality is turned up, what's going to happen is your color is going to evaporate. Now, I know this because mine already has. And so it's a little more extensive than Dorothy's experience, but your colors are going to turn to black and white. More accurately, you're going to realize they always have been. Reality shows you the limits of the value that you already possess, experience, and so on. What this is like, which is not a coincidence, is if you've ever, I think I just have the weirdest experiences in my life, temporal experiences. It's quite a collection of things, but I don't know if you've ever messed around with like a forge or a kiln, something really hot, way hotter than like a kitchen oven. So if you've ever smelted metal, because I mean, who hasn't, right? If you have a metal smelter, I was fooling around with one of these and I put a piece of rebar in there to mix up. I was melting aluminum. And it was really hot in there. We had it way too hot. And so I pulled the rebar out and it was glowing red. And I had a sheet of wood out, just an old scrap piece of plywood. And I set down the rebar on the wood so we wouldn't make a mess or anything. And when the rebar got close to the wood, it immediately just burst into flames. There wasn't even contact. It was just burning, right? So what you value in life right now, a great deal of it, I'll leave you some hope and not say all of it, but a great deal of it will incinerate, not even on contact with greater reality. It just needs a waft of greater reality, and it will crumble to pieces. And maybe God takes you up in a tornado where it's just you and no one else knows what's going on. Maybe it's totally a communal experience, like you're in a war zone or something, or you experienced a terrible tragedy as a family or something like that. Maybe it's a mix of both, where there's a public component and a private component. But I'm not just talking about a trial, and I don't want to go too much into this, but I'm talking about God cranking up reality and subjecting you to the fire. And so that color turns to black and white. But this is where it chains to another analogy I've used in the past, which is walking through a train tunnel. And there are a lot of those on the East Coast. So I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I have. And it gets cold and dark, and you can see the light. It doesn't seem like it's very far, but the further in you go, the further the distance seems to the end. And it just keeps going. And it looks like it gets further with every step that you take, which is bizarre. It's some kind of optical illusion. Meanwhile, the tunnel gets cold and wet. It's a very tangible experience. It's visceral. And at some point, you just have to decide to keep going. And it's weird because if you look back, of course, that light's getting smaller. It seems like both lights are getting smaller at the same time, which is impossible, right? But that's what it looks like. And you just have to keep going. And all this, what happens is it seems like all at once, the light will stop shrinking. And then that seems to go on forever, and then the light starts growing. And so as you go through this sort of thing in life, if you go through this sort of thing in life, you'll see that there is a rainbow, and there are puppies, but they're different. They're better. They're the real thing. They're not the free sample. I could get pretty deep into properties of all of this, but I'm going to save that for a future date. It's extremely important. Because historically, this experience that I'm talking about, that I'm describing, it was always open to everyone, but it's a voluntary experience historically. It's a voluntary experience. It requires consent. And if you want to learn more about that, you can look at the book of Job. And I know I'm just dancing over all of this so briefly, but Job entered into this descent. And it's a special kind of descent. It's only for people who have fully repented of their sins. There are reasons for that. But he revoked his consent. He was good at first, and then he revoked his consent. So the Lord terminated the trial. But we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to keep going. And it's very important that we do. So it used to be an individual experience, and it used to be voluntary. The end times is different because it's not individual and it's not voluntary. And so while, my friends were being lighthearted, they're going to watch this, and, I'm not calling them out at all. There was nothing, they didn't do anything wrong. But I'm just sharing this because it illustrates something. The times that are coming will overcome you. But the good news is that there is a way to overcome them. And there's a process, and it's all been planned. The Lord knows exactly what he's doing. And what he's doing is showing you and proving to you that he has overcome all things, and showing you why that matters and why it matters to you, what value it has to you. And there's an opportunity in there that if you navigate that well, you will come to know him more. And we come full circle to life more abundantly. It turns out that to see the more meaningful colors, you first have to lose the colors that you currently see. And it will change you in ways that can't be undone. And it will take from you things that can't be restored. And it's supposed to be that way. I'll just touch on this since we're here. Going back to this rebar figure, I guess. It's not quite an analogy, but that fire can get so hot that even before there's contact, it incinerates. what gets near it. This is kind of like the furnace with Daniel's 3 friends. Remember, they heated it 7 times more, and that number is not a coincidence. As God puts you through this experience, what happens is he has to, actually, I don't know that I want to go here. I think that if I talk about this, I'm guaranteed to do it poorly because there's just not enough space to do it well here. Can I shorten this and say the point at least? There are fires hot enough that the puppies and rainbows you know about wouldn't even put a dent in suffering. Like nothing, no effect whatsoever. And that's a hard thing to think about. It's very difficult to imagine. Or maybe not. Maybe you've gone through some rough things and that you can imagine that. But part of our process here in life is to suffer to the maximum extent that we are willing to, so that God can show us what he's really worth. A better way of saying that is how good he really is. Because it's almost like a safety net. If your suffering is limited, I explained this many years ago with the pendulum. Gospel Topics Explained with the Pendulum is the name of the video. You can only experience joy to the same displacement that you've experienced suffering. And that joy is also experiencing God. It's knowing him. And if you have a limit of how much you're willing to suffer, that is also a limit in how much you're willing to know him. As that pendulum gets drawn back and you say, Lord, no limits, let's do this, you quickly reach the point where all of these things that used to be a support to you and people, they cease to be a support to you. And in being willing to endure those things, you become the thing or the person that makes the suffering worthwhile to other people. And it all sets up as a hierarchy. And the Lord is at the top. Well, I'm sure I said way too much there, but hopefully this at least lays some groundwork for a lot of things that I'll be teaching about in the future. And also helps you understand that no matter how devoid I may seem of puppy dogs and rainbows, I have the ones that are worth the most. And I've seen them, and they're mine, even if I don't have them here and now. They've been given to me with an irrevocable promise.